Every year, I spend a considerable amount of time talking to current MBA students about their career plans and their interest in entrepreneurship through acquisition. When they understand that this is an option that's available to them, there's a light bulb moment. Their eyes light up. And it is a way into something that allows you to have more control of your own destiny and really take an entrepreneurial path. The opportunity to leverage capital sources to buy these businesses is particularly attractive to these folks that are graduating from some of the top MBA programs in the country.
Search Party is sponsored by Avid Bank, Boulay, Mayer Brown, and Plexus Capital. The lead sponsor is Next Coast Legacy. Hello and welcome to Search Party. I'm David Snow, your host, and today we're joined by Dustin Sellers and Anthony Walker, both of Next Coast Legacy. Next Coast Legacy is, of course, a pioneer in the entrepreneurship through acquisition strategy. Both Dustin and Anthony are longtime investors using the ETA strategy, which is becoming increasingly popular as a model for value creation, wealth creation. We're going to be talking about their paths to success using the entrepreneurship through acquisition strategy. So let's get into things. Dustin and Anthony, how are you guys doing today?
Fantastic, David. It's been a long time coming. Really excited to be talking to you.
Doing well, David. Good to see you.
Anthony, why don't we start with a question for you? We want to know about the background of both of you, and we also want to know why are we talking and what is this podcast supposed to be? But let's start with you, Anthony. What evidence have you seen that the entrepreneurship through acquisition strategy is really at an inflection point, is gaining in popularity? What do you see?
A good place to start to answer this question might go back to kind of 30 years ago, really the infancy of the asset class when, as I joke with Dustin, who is a former searcher, dinosaurs roamed the earth and there were only a handful of folks that were brave enough to pursue this as a career path. And I think in the years that Dustin searched, there were only a handful of people that pursued this as a career post-graduation from business school.
8 to be exact, Anthony, 8.
And it was predominantly something that only students at Harvard Business School and the Stanford Graduate School of Business pursued. If you fast forward to today, there are several hundred searchers that decide to search post-graduation or that have come from mid-career points in their journey and decide that they want to buy a small or medium-sized business leveraging the entrepreneurship through acquisition model. And commensurate with that, there have been a number of funds like Next Coast Legacy that have popped up to provide capital to those entrepreneurs. And so if I were just measuring this by sheer interest, volume of searchers, volume of institutional capital that is dedicated to this space, I'd say by all accounts, we're not only at an inflection point, we've seen a recent explosion in interest.
Dustin, you are, of course, a former searcher, and now you back other searchers as they look for businesses that are meant to grow and succeed. Why is now a good time to launch a podcast like this? Why, talk about it? There's a lot of podcasts in the world. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think kind of piggybacking on what Anthony said about the sheer explosion of interest and the communal growth in the ETA asset class. No time like the present to create a platform and a place to really kind of hone in on what are the core values in the proverbial mission of the asset class. I look at the search fund as an evolution of 3 phases. You had kind of the 80s through the early 2000s, where it was kind of a notional novel concept taught by Irv Grousbeck and Howard Stevenson. Then you had the kind of the 2000s into the early teens, where all of a sudden, private equity and others really started waking up to this. And now we are center stage, right? Unequivocally, we're center stage. And once you become center stage, there's an opportunity now to really kind of allow that narrative to touch a lot of different people in a lot of different areas who are becoming, for folks like myself and Anthony or Mike Smirklow, another founder of Next Coast, the search fund is in our DNA. But for a lot of people right now, they're just becoming exposed to it. And so I think this platform is all about giving people a voice and getting a real understanding of the DNA of this really fabulous small business, medium-sized business acquisition solution.
Question for both of you. Why is the entrepreneurship through acquisition strategy popular, particularly among let's call it, people with MBAs, younger people starting out in their careers? What is the appeal? Anthony, what are you hearing from the people that you talk to?
Every year I spend a considerable amount of time on campus talking to current MBA students about their career plans and their interest in entrepreneurship through acquisition. And what we consistently hear is that this is a form of entrepreneurship that prior to attending business school, they didn't know existed, right? There is a lot of information, a lot of podcasts out there on the venture capital world. And if you have an interest of building a business from scratch and founding a startup, there are a lot of resources available to you to kind of help you go down that path. And I think entrepreneurship in general is an area where across business schools, there's been an increased level of interest for several decades now, right? It goes back to kind of the Web 1.0 time period in the late 90s and early 2000s. And only just now is the concept of buying an existing business becoming more popularized and widely understood. And so the students that we talk to, when they understand that this is an option that's available to them, there's a light bulb moment. Their eyes light up, right? And it is a way to go around that kind of traditional pathway post-MBA towards more corporate roles into something that allows you to have more control of your own destiny and really take an entrepreneurial path. And I think it's that aspect of this and the opportunity to leverage capital sources to buy these businesses is particularly attractive to these folks that are graduating from some of the top MBA programs in the country.
Dustin, as you talk to MBAs and you visit MBA programs and campuses, what kind of energy are you picking up?
Yeah, I mean, it's explosive at this point. Yeah, I was part of the USC Entrepreneur Undergrad program, back in the late 80s, early 90s. And, the idea of entrepreneur kind of grew up with this idea that you had to have an idea. You had to concept something, build a business plan around it, go sell it. And that's what the essence of entrepreneurship was for the greater part of the last 20 or 30 years. That's simply not the case, right? And what the search model does for folks, especially in the business school that want leadership and want to be part of something bigger in a business environment that don't have a founder mindset or the idea of starting something from scratch. This is an opportunity and a place to have the best of both worlds, where you get to step into a leadership role, but you don't have to necessarily have concepted the business from scratch. That is the glue that is kind of lighting the fire now at the top programs around the country. And you're seeing that zeal come through in the curriculum and the sheer number of students that are choosing this as a path, not consulting, not investment banking, not brand management, but to jump right into that CEO seat and run that business.
Anthony and Dustin, both of you are managing partners at Next Coast Legacy. It's an ETA firm, but tell us more about what Next Coast Legacy does.
We are a private investment firm. We are based in Austin, Texas, and we are 100% focused on providing capital via the entrepreneurship through acquisition or search fund model. And so we help aspiring entrepreneurs identify, diligence, and then underwrite and acquire small or medium-sized businesses within the lower middle market space. Next Coast Investment Committee and both myself and Dustin come from a long history of investing in lower middle market businesses and running and operating lower middle market companies. And our goal is really to surround our teams, those folks that are graduating from business school, with the resources to be successful.
Dustin, maybe follow-up question for you. Can you describe what you do on a day-to-day basis? I mean, you're meeting with potential searchers, and of course, you're meeting with possibly the sellers of businesses that are found by these searchers. So just talk about your day-to-day activities.
One of the things about Next Coast that's, I think what we always consider to be our sweet sauce is this unique, Anthony always calls it the yin and yang, of the unique balance between the core of the firm, which are actual searchers, Mike Smirklow having one of the top return profiles of all time, and then myself obviously having a decent return profile as well. Having been through the entire cycle, then mixing that with Anthony and the prowess that he brings on the diligencing, the financial acumen, and the real kind of unearthing of the quality of the business. You bring those two things together, that's really at the essence of what gets me excited about what we're doing and where this asset class is going. So for me, my day-to-day is touching three different points. My greatest value add is working with the individual searchers themselves. And often that is in not the ideation phase, but really is this a good business? Is this a good fit? What are the macro factors that are affecting that business? And then jumping in post-acquisition and working with them as a mentor in their, first 18 to 24 months as a CEO. Having been there, done that, there's really no way to explain it till you're in it. And it's a lot more than you ever can imagine because it's just such a different environment. So that's my day-to-day. I have the luxury of having a team with Anthony and Tatiana and Rohan and others that really get into the quick of the individual businesses that we look at. I get a lot more of the human capital piece of the puzzle and strategy and ideation as it relates to, is this searcher a good fit for this business? Is this business a good fit for our portfolio?
Anthony, you mentioned investing in lower middle market businesses, smaller businesses. Can you elaborate on that a bit? What kind of businesses are you looking for?
We're looking for businesses that are between $2 and $5 million of EBITDA, or for those software related businesses, companies that have between $3 to $10 million in annual recurring revenue, or ARR. There are also a number of kind of key underwriting characteristics that we look for in companies, most important of which is recurring revenue. We want businesses that have high degrees of recurring revenue. We don't invest in cyclical industries. Our businesses typically have between 15 and 25% or higher EBITDA margins. We stay away from turnarounds. We stay away from distressed situations. We want businesses that have low capital intensity. And so CapEx as a percentage of revenue, working capital as a percentage of revenue are quite low. We really are looking for companies that have a business services orientation. And then from an industry perspective, again, business services is the calling card or the hallmark of the companies that we invest in. But we also try to stay away from energy, heavy manufacturing, again, things that carry cyclical risk, where you have less confidence in the consistency of cash flows of those companies over time. We also put a little bit of leverage on our businesses relative to kind of true middle market or even mega cap private equity. It would pale in comparison to the degree of leverage. We really are looking for businesses that are growing well excess of GDP in an area of the market where we think that growth rates can double, triple relative to GDP and really produce outsized returns through value creation, not through economic or financial arbitrage opportunities.
In general, in the ETA market, investors are targeting lower middle market businesses. Certainly, Next Coast Legacy targets lower middle market businesses. A lot of these businesses are not technologically advanced, despite the many digital tools that they may have. Can you talk about the opportunity to really add value to these businesses by bringing in, a layer of digital gold to help them grow?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think that there's been a tremendous evolution that has occurred within the asset class over the last several years. And it really takes two forms, David. I think the first is, as you articulated, a view towards digital transformation, or kind of thought of or said differently, how do we pull technology through older, more mature companies that have not focused on that as an element of their value creation strategy, right? And for many of these business owners, we talk about them being baby boomers and older. They didn't grow up with a computer in their pocket in the form of an iPhone and really don't have an awareness of ways to leverage technology to drive operational efficiencies. And so at Next Coast, that is one component that we focus on day in and day out, is how do we leverage technology as a weapon, and how do we instill it within our businesses to compete against those other players in the market that don't have the same lens and don't really understand the value creation opportunities that come from technology. The second, I would say, is the reality that, even when Dustin and others of his generation were searching, the common refrain was avoid technology at all costs. And the reality of the world that we live in today is we can't avoid technology. Technology is everywhere. It is ubiquitous, right? And increasingly, the search and entrepreneurship through acquisition ecosystem has started to embrace the thought of doing software acquisitions. And on the surface, there are a lot of elements that look very similar to the traditional kind of EBITDA-based business services deals that the asset class has acquired. High recurring revenue, good margin structures. Now, there's an important difference between gross margin and EBITDA margin when you're valuing a software company that come into account. But assuming that a software business grows over time, high gross margins should translate into high EBITDA margins, assuming there's good operating leverage to the company and good customer acquisition costs, et cetera. And so I think that there are a handful of investors in the space, Next Coast included, that have really embraced that. Now, it comes with a very strict set of underwriting criteria, such that we're not getting too far from the value-based investing that I think has resulted in real success in ETA over the decades from which it was founded. But there is certainly an increased appetite and awareness that you can do a software deal within the search fund model and the search fund ecosystem.
We're going to be doing a lot more episodes of Search Party in the future, and we're really going to dig deep into some of these topics, the kinds of businesses that people are looking for, the attributes of searchers that are favored. But Dustin, maybe you could just offer us a little bit more insight into who makes a successful searcher. What are you looking for?
There's a number of folks out there constantly using personality profile testing, trying to create an algorithm to identify the perfect rider for the horse. At the end of the day, Anthony and I talk about this a lot. And if we look across the literally hundreds of searchers that we've talked with and interact with on a daily basis, there are a couple of key attributes. One of them is pragmatism, right? So willingness to not be locked into one stream of thinking, have a very kind of open aperture and a very open canvas, while at the same time adhering to kind of the key attributes of what makes a good business. Active listening is something that I've really struggled with per my wife, but it's something that is very, very important. Feedback from your investor group, feedback from your mentors as you're going through your search, and your ability to pivot is critical, and even more critical once you're in the business and things aren't going exactly perfectly. Tenacity, a word that was kind of, I think you have to have tenacity. It's not something that you can teach, because the lower middle market has a way of really, really finding your weaknesses in a way that, few other asset classes do. So, that rigor and that willingness to kind of really grind and get through those tough situations are critical. I think that's something that we will plumb more over many episodes is the search fund right for you, right? Because I think right now there is a lot of excitement and a lot of, wow, this speaks to me. This is something I really want to do. But that doesn't necessarily factor in, do you have the DNA and is it a perfect match for, critical earning years of your life? There's a lot of easier ways to make money, and there's a lot of opportunity cost that comes with rushing into something of this magnitude in this career decision. And again, I think that's where Search Party can really be advantageous in helping people ferret that out and think about whether this is a good career decision for them long term.
Dustin, I think you once told me that someone who succeeds in this kind of a strategy is willing to bite off their own arm or chew off their own arm. What was the term you used? I can't remember.
Well, it's actually, so yes, chew off your own arm to not lose people money. That is at the core of the search fund philosophy for sure. But Irv Grossbeck once told Ben Godsey, my esteemed partner from Pro Service back in the day, that the search fund was a series of different tests. And, going to the top of Mount Everest without oxygen was actually finding the business. But then once you actually jump into the business, you put on a scuba suit and you manage underwater. And I found that to be actually really, really good visual narrative of just how hard the process is to actually achieve a great outcome. And that's why the community is so strong. That's why there's so much connectivity between past searchers and investors. You don't, it's sororital, it's fraternal. You don't really leave the community once you've been part of it, because it's a religious experience. It's a war. It's all in one. And really just excited about where it's going.
Great. Well, I'd love to hear each of your stories about sort of how you got into the searcher business, how you succeeded, and at what points along the journey you almost chewed off your own arm. Maybe we could start with Anthony. Give us the executive summary of how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, it's been a little bit of a circuitous route. Broadly defined, I would say that I've spent the entirety of my career, the last close to 20 years, in financial diligence, underwriting, and investing roles. I started my career at a little bank that you guys might remember called Lehman Brothers, which is a story for an entire other podcast. We could do 15 episodes on the 5 years that I was there. But I went from there to the investment management world, did long only investing for a firm out of Chicago that had 3 to 5 year time horizons. And it was really the first time in my career where, one, I had skin in the game and I was able to do direct investing, but that I was also able to look at businesses over a longer time horizon and really invest in the future of that company. I went from there to doing something completely opposite. I worked at a couple of large hedge funds, Citadel and Millennium, where I managed portfolios in the industrial space. And it was a completely different mindset. You were charged with becoming the expert in every business and every industry that you looked at. But I really cut my teeth there in terms of developing a transferable skill set in financial due diligence. And over time, I became a little bit disillusioned at this idea that I was spending an inordinate amount of time becoming an expert in a business or industry, but we would hold that security for, in most situations, kind of 3 weeks to 3 months at max. And so as I started to think about opportunities to move further out on the duration curve, I got introduced to a former colleague from Citadel that had similarly found his way into the search ecosystem, and I had never heard of it before, right? And so similar to the Entrepreneurs in Business School, I had this aha moment of, wow, how do I pair this background that I have in due diligence and underwriting across energy, industrial, consumer, technology-related end markets with a appetite to take duration risk and invest over longer time periods. And in some instances, I say search kind of found me, and it's been a great run. And I really enjoy what I do, working with young entrepreneurs and helping them understand the viability of these small businesses that we identify on a day in and day out basis.
Let's take a quick break to learn about a partner you should consider as you build a business in the lower middle market, Avid Bank. Based in Silicon Valley, Avid Bank has been dedicated to the search fund community for more than 10 years. The professionals at Avid Bank are seasoned veterans of the Entrepreneurship-Through-Acquisition strategy. They have a long history of working with growing companies across the life cycle of an investment. With more than $2.25 billion in assets, Avid Bank is known for its highly responsive, consultative practice, as well as its deep knowledge of M&A financing in the lower middle market. The friendly professionals at Avid Bank have a straightforward motto: we do what we say. And they really do. Look for episodes of Search Party that feature market commentary from Avid Bank experts. You'll learn a lot about the dynamics of lending and finance in the lower middle market. All right, now back to the episode. Dustin, I'd love to hear your story of how you started out and how you got where you are in the search business. And we do know that the story does run through Hawaii, so let's hear it.
Yeah, I have the true benefit of one of the few folks that have bought a business in lovely Hawaii. Yeah, going back a few steps of talking about the concept of entrepreneurism. I started out in the world of entrepreneurism with USC undergrad, thinking that I was going to go start a business, run a business. My parents, I was a third generation kind of entrepreneurial family, and so that was my mindset. And kind of fast forward to San Francisco, Web 1.0, late 90s, had joined Benchmark Capital with an individual by the name of Carl Jacobs, who was working in the EAR program there. And we were concepting and looking for technologies to build a business. It was Web 1.0. Went through multiple rounds of funding, cruised all over the globe, starting different entities, and really went through the entire venture capital entrepreneur experience and came away recognizing that was not my DNA. And I was disillusioned, much the way that Anthony talked about being disillusioned. I wanted to build something. I wanted to be part of something, but I needed some ground rules. I needed a foundation. I needed something that was tangible. And as we all know, in the startup world and in the venture world, that's exactly anathema to the DNA. You have to be comfortable with 100% pivot in how you make money, and that was definitely not me. In that process, Mike Smirklo, who was a classmate of mine from Kellogg, and we were very close, and we'd both come out. He was working for Mark Andreessen at the time at LoudCloud while I was at Benchmark. He said, "Hey, I'm leaving to go do this thing called the Search Fund," and he took me to lunch and told me about it. And as I think is the case for many, many people who get introduced to search, it was a religious moment. It was are you kidding me? There's actually people out there that would potentially give me money to go find a business and have the time to go do that. It didn't even seem real or that it was a possible solution. Well, Mike went on to buy ServiceSource, which went on to go public and do amazing things. That was enough for me to recognize that this was something that I really needed to do. And with Mike's help and support and introduction to a number of folks Fast forward, Ben Godsey, who's my partner and still runs Pro Service today. We looked at a lot of different things and a lot of different places. We were nothing if we weren't prolific in our abilities to find businesses. And we found a business in Honolulu, Hawaii, that at the time did outsourced HR, which was was kind of a dirty word if you think about outsourcing in the early 2000s, and certainly outsourcing HR seemed crazy. But it had a macro trend, and we had a lot of help from friends at Housatonic that were giving us a lot of guidance on, the type of businesses to look for. And it fit kind of 7 of the 10 criteria. And I ran it for, close to 8 years with Ben, and had a couple of really, really nice recaps and returns there before I left the business. Once in the business, it's almost impossible to not be part of the search community at that point. And so Mike Smirklo and I really did a lot of direct investment together as he was starting Next Coast. And that was the beginning of the ideation of, gosh, I think there's really something here where we could really take all of our learnings and our experiences and really push that out into the marketplace. But the key piece of the puzzle was Anthony, and having Anthony kind of come into the team and be part of that to create that yin and yang that we've talked about. I think that's what you hear from a lot of searchers about why they like Next Coast is you've got that operational side, but then you have that really, really strong diligence side together. A couple of little footnotes. We are Dave and Rich of Search Fund Partners' first exit, which, those guys have gone on to do, I think, 8 different funds, but we were their first exit. Kind of proud of that. And I think we might have been Kent Weaver's one of his first exit, or at least one of his best exits. So there's a lot of history there and a lot of connectivity to the community.
That's awesome. I do have follow-up questions for both of you. Anthony, you came into the search business from, a couple of large hedge funds. You were largely investing in securities, let's call it. They were part of larger companies, but you're investing in securities. Now you're dealing in, buying the whole company. You're dealing with people's families. It's a very interpersonal business. Talk about that a bit, because if you're not really a people person, you're probably not going to succeed in this business.
No, 100%. And, I think one of the interesting elements about working in public markets is that to a degree, you also have to be a people person, right? We talked to and interview CEOs, CFOs, heads of investor relations, business unit leaders for a lot of large companies on a very consistent basis to make sure that we have a full understanding of those businesses. And, for those people to talk to you and to share information, they have to like you, right? And you have to be able to frame your questions in an appropriate manner and be respectful of their business. You have to have a decent understanding of their business. It's come across as credible when you're asking questions, and like you've done your homework and you've done your research to fully understand their business and their business model. Those are some of the soft skills that are required, I think, in investing broadly and generally. And I tell folks this all the time. In a lot of ways, my prior experience allowed me to develop a transferable skill set, both from a financial due diligence and an underwriting perspective, as well as from, how do you relate to and talk to a business owner that cares about their business first and foremost. They don't care about your resume. They don't care about the business school that you went to. They care that you have an interest in their company and that you have a background and an understanding of what they do, such that once you've acquired it, you can be successful in running and operating that business. And so those aspects, those elements of emotional intelligence are extremely critical. And were it not for having some of those elements, working in equity research and having to be a salesperson for part of your role, right? And to work with clients that are doing bottoms-up fundamental analysis, but that you're jockeying for their business from the other investment banks out there. All of those elements and the totality of that experience, I think, positioned me well to kind of make this transition from public markets to private markets. It's not to say there wasn't a learning curve, certainly, and it is different, right? Talking to the CEO of a Fortune 500 company is very, very different from talking to a business owner that lives in the middle of Iowa that's running a $2 million plumbing company, right? It's a different set of folks, different types of people. But as long as you can be relatable and I think find a point of relation with anyone, regardless of background and where they come from, I think you can be successful in finding ways to talk to people and understanding what's important to them.
Another important point is that for a lot of aspirational searchers, if they do find the right company and they get the backing they need, it's probably their first time being a CEO. Now, traditionally, you would either start your own business, so de facto you were CEO, or perhaps you'd work your way up the corporate ladder to become the CEO. But Dustin, in your case, acquiring with partners the pro service business in Honolulu, Hawaii, you became the co-CEO of the business. What was that process like? Did people accept you? Were you worried that you wouldn't have the tools necessary to get the job done?
Yeah, when I write the book, the revisionist history will be very apparent. Let's be very clear. Like every single time a searcher steps in to the business, it is a very, very anathema experience to anything that they've done in their past. Demographically, sociographically, socioeconomically, it's a very, very different. Lower middle market is very, very different than McKinsey, BCG, Goldman Sachs, Procter and Gamble. You name it, wherever they've come from or they've cut their teeth in their their limited experience. So obviously they're bored, they're mentors, and the connectivity around them and all of those aspects we talked about, that Anthony talked about, a very good EQ and being pragmatic and being a good listener, all is really, really critical. At the core of that, you said something about partner versus solo, and it's something that I hope, over the course of multiple podcasts is something to talk about, is that, just because you don't have good EQ doesn't mean you can't be a great search fund person, but there is also a need in that capacity potentially to have a partner that has those skills, right? Just like I could not, without my partner, have completed the full course of the cycle of the search on my own. I didn't have the M&A skill set. I didn't have that, but I had the revenue generating side and I had the outbound EQ side. So I think that's really important piece of the puzzle is understanding and being self-effacing of what is your skill set. What do you bring to the table? If search speaks to you and you want to be part of it, and the lower middle market's where you want to be eyes wide open. And if you have the full capability to be the solo search, do the solo search. But if you lack certain things, find a partner that can bring that to the table. So that can be, complementary and have the highest probability. And that's something Anthony and I really, really screen for, is how self-aware is the searcher of what they're going to be experiencing and what they're good at and what they're not good at. And as we've all learned in our lives and our careers, what we're not good at and how we minimize that is far more likely to be our success agent than singularly manipulating what we're good at.
As you two are, speaking to aspiring searchers, as you're, on business school campuses, you're probably approached by a lot of people who say, I really want to get into the ETA business. How do I do it? What do you typically say?
It's really important to talk about what search and entrepreneurship through acquisition is and what it isn't. I think the most important piece of advice that I give people is, if you are pursuing search as a backdoor path to private equity, you're doing it for the wrong reasons, right? We are focused on, and the folks that are successful are people that want to be operators. They want to run a small or medium-sized business over an extended time period. They aren't investors. They don't want to do a deal. They aren't interested in just running a financial modeling exercise. They actually have an interest in managing HR issues and dealing with people and getting into the strategic decisions that really power the success of a small and medium-sized business. It is not a financial exercise. Although there are many people that successfully run and exit businesses that pursue paths in private equity, I think that you do yourself a disservice if you approach this from the standpoint of thinking about search being a conduit to that. That is an outcome or a byproduct of having success as an operator. But you really have to jump into this with both feet, with an understanding that I really want to have to run a business to be successful in this. And it really is those folks that kind of, you view this as a stepping stone, that don't succeed because they don't come in with the right mindset. The other thing that I always tell people is do your research, right? There are a number of resources available to you to get a really good understanding of what entrepreneurship through acquisition is and what it takes to be successful. Search Party is likely to be a great resource for folks as they continue down this path, but it is increasingly competitive as well. And those folks that clearly demonstrate an interest in this space, that interest is evidenced through the research. It's evidenced through the number of folks that they've talked to that are current and former searchers that inform the opinion and the interest that they have, are going to be better positioned for success, and certainly better positioned to have compelling conversations with investors which you'll need to do to be able to secure the funding to do this.
How about you, Dustin? When you get buttonholed at a ETA conference, identified as being a longtime practitioner of the ETA strategy, what do you say when someone says, how do I do what you did?
You've got to be all in, right? There's no halfway point in this. There's not I'm going to think about trying this and see how it works out. The lower middle market just doesn't care about what you've done or who you are, or what business school you went to. That owner likely started that business, paid for their house with that business, paid for every vacation with that business, bought all their kids' houses and vacations for their children with that business, and did it with their own hands. And the only reason they're talking to you is because they don't have a succession plan. So starting from that perspective of understanding that mindset, you have to be, committed to that. This is, and then the reason we have legacy in our name is that we're taking over somebody's legacy, right? We're continuing the American dream for somebody and helping it blossom to the next phase. And there's a lot of that goes into that and a lot to unpack in that. And so being all in, and when I said that the search fund model spoke to me, I don't lie. I mean, that it just was one of those things where it really was like, this is exactly what I want to do. And I've never looked back. Right. And, it took me to my early 50s to get a partner with Anthony to become an institutional investor, because I still wanted to have my hand on the joystick. I wanted to still be shifting the gears and making those decisions, because at the core of what makes a really, really good return in the search model is revenue growth, right? This is not financial engineering. This is not an LBO. This is not structurally oriented. This is, can you grow this business profitably over a period of time? And everybody loves growth. It's infectious and it's competitive and it's exciting. And it's one of the hardest things. If all that speaks to you, you're in the right space. Just make sure you have the right investors and the right mentors and your eyes wide open, and you're willing to be, as I said, pragmatic through the process. That's the definition of success, but it's got to speak to you. It's not something that it's, wow, I didn't get the perfect job in investment banking, so maybe I'll go try this. And we're seeing a little bit of that right now. And I think that will ferret itself out, because the reality is it's really not easy.
Dustin, the ETA community, the ETA model of investing largely has grown up in the US. Do you see evidence that it's starting to gain traction internationally? And do you see ETA eventually becoming a global market?
Yeah, I mean, at the core, we do not have a lock on lower middle market globally, right? Small business is at the core of virtually every economy, democratically led or not. And so it is a global phenomenon. I think it is hard for North American investors often to get around some of the issues as it relates to currency arbitrage and other macro factors in other investment communities, whether that be Europe or South America or Asia. But what we're seeing and getting excited about is you're seeing those communities grow up within those environments, right? So you're seeing a really strong contingent in Europe. You're seeing a really strong contingent in South America. I think Asia's a bit behind, but I think you'll see, Korea and Japan for sure catch up. And I think that's really exciting, right? Because we don't have a lock on this. And if it's something that we can export and we can teach and we can create the same level of excitement, albeit maybe a decade behind, I think they'll catch up very quickly, because as Anthony talked about earlier, technology is creating a convergence, right? And digital transformation and access to technology and kind of ubiquity of it is creating an environment where a lot of things that were not as easy in the past are much easier to accomplish in some of these other environments that maybe aren't as proverbially entrepreneurial as say the United States.
Well, we know where we are right now as far as awareness and popularity of entrepreneurship through acquisition. There's a lot more awareness among MBA programs and people armed with MBAs. Presumably, there's a lot more awareness among potential sellers of businesses. They come in contact with these searchers, and it's not necessarily the first time they've ever heard of the model. But from here going forward, what would both of you predict for the, near-term and long-term future of the ETA market?
Growth. measured in a number of ways. I think for starters, there are an increasing number of small or medium-sized businesses owned by baby boomers, folks that are transitioning, entering the retirement phase of their lives without a succession plan and without a natural kind of heir apparent to take on the operations of that small or medium-sized business that they've built. That is a tremendous opportunity for anyone that wants to pursue entrepreneurship through acquisition as a career path, to step into that kind of heir role or be the long lost son or daughter of a business owner that really does need to step away from that company within the next several years. And we think that there are close to 400,000 businesses in the United States that fit the size and type that we talk about when we talk about size of company that we typically are attracted to. And 2/3 of those are owned by baby boomers. That's a tremendous opportunity. At the same time, as we've seen the proliferation of awareness from just Stanford and Harvard to almost all of the top 25 business schools in the country, we talked about the explosion in interest from MBA students and folks that may have graduated from the MBA program 5 years ago and have come back to this. I think that trend only continues. And we are super excited day in and day out to get to work with some of the most talented entrepreneurs and young minds in our country that have all happened upon ETA as a career path. I think over the next 5 years, this becomes a defined track for a lot of folks that are graduating from business school, that are thinking about the next stage of their career, and becomes a household element of lower middle market investing across the nation.
Dustin, same question, phrased slightly differently. What makes you bullish to be involved in the ETA community going forward?
Yeah, I mean, piggybacking on the growth component, everybody talks about, okay, there's 200 searches going on. Back in the day, you only had 8 when you were searching. Against 400,000, the math is good of the number of businesses that are available, right? Where I get really excited because, part of the third phase of one's career is being able to mentor, is to see the type of folks that are coming in. It is not the traditional single white male from a top 5 business school look anymore. Diversity is there. It started from the male-female piece, but now we're getting a really strong minority piece in attraction. I think that's really powerful, right? Because if you think about the different cultural walks of life and the different cultural elements of business, to be able to have a strong minority push into the searching community as well, the colloquialisms and the cultural overtones and the connectivity in different business communities, and to see so many different minority groups really becoming aware and really leaning in, that's something that Anthony and I really get excited about, because that just opens up so many more businesses and so many more spaces within this great economy that is the United States. And the lower middle market and the small business community is the bedrock of our economy. And to see all of these young minds deciding, instead of to go to iBanking in New York or consulting in London, to go run a plumbing business in St. Louis and do a digital transformation there is really exciting, right? It's almost hard to fathom that that's occurring in the top business schools in the country, and yet it is. And so that's, I think what I'm seeing and what I get excited about is the type of folks and the energy that they're bringing to the lower middle market that was, quite honestly, their children said, I don't want to go run that plumbing business. And all of a sudden now you have the top minds and the top business schools saying, yeah, I'll buy it because I think it's fabulous.
Well, I want to thank you too for sharing your experience and your expertise with us. We're going to talk about a lot more in the future related to the entrepreneurship through acquisition strategy. There's so many things to explore: how to find deals, how to structure deals, how to add value when you actually are growing a company, things you need to know about monetizing. For now, I'm going to let you two guys go. You've got some businesses to find and some searchers to mentor. So, much appreciated, and I'll see you in the next episode.
Fantastic, David. Thank you so much.
Thanks, David.
Search Party is sponsored by Avid Bank, Boulay, Mayer Brown, and Plexus Capital. The lead sponsor is Next Coast Legacy.